Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. We're about to start the next session. And it's actually me presenting first. As I mentioned earlier, we have made this whole day and actually this year's study about looking at the relationship between perceptions and performance of nation brands to just bring it home a bit more and to understand better how soft power can be leveraged to attract investment, to boost trade, to attract talent and tourism into countries. And what we've done is we analyzed the relationships between the Global Soft Power Index score as well as perception, as well as performance of nation brands across each of those four economic segments: investment, trade, talent, and tourism. And as you can see, what we found out is that there is a clear and strong association between perceptions and performance, between soft power and the economic impact of it. How to read this? What this basically means is that soft power correlates with 34% of the variation in FDI inflows coming into a country. For trade and talent, that's even higher at 60%, and from tourism, somewhere in the middle at 47%. The rest of that equation to 100% is all the other objective factors that come into play. And with investment, there's probably more of them than with each and every one of those other areas. There's the tax and regulation that comes into play. There is distance. There is industry fit. There is even the fact whether you've invested last year and have the money to invest again this year. So that's why that correlation there is perhaps a bit lower. But even so, it is actually quite strong. And as the first panel is going to be covering investment and trade, that's what I'm going to focus on in this presentation, and then my colleagues will take you through the results of that analysis for talent and for tourism in the sessions in the afternoon. As you can see from this graph, there is that strong association with the Global Soft Power Index score on the horizontal axis and FDI inflows over 3 years coming into all of the 193 countries in our study on the vertical axis. So having established that and realized, okay, well, this all makes sense, there is a relationship between perceptions and performance, what we then ask ourselves is, so how do I improve those perceptions in the hope that the performance will improve too? And we've asked new questions in our study this year about recommendation of nation brands as destinations to invest in, to buy products and services from, to work in, to study in, and to visit. And because we've got such a huge sample, 170,000 respondents in 101 markets, we're able to do statistical analysis that tells us what drives those perceptions, what drives this recommendation of nation brands as destinations for investment, trade, talent, and tourism. And here are the results for what really makes people tick when it comes to their choices of whether they would invest or not. Now, mind you, this is a general public sample, so obviously the general public has an impact on investment decisions, but more of an indirect one. In the other areas, they have more of a direct way. Obviously, we decide if we buy a product, we decide if we go somewhere on holiday, but we don't all decide about where the money is invested on behalf of a company or a government. So that's also why this relationship for investment is slightly lower than it is for trade or for talent attraction. Now on to the results of this drivers analysis of what really matters to drive investment into a country. You would probably think that ease of doing business is almost the sole factor, obviously. Well, what it turns out is that it is important, but the other economic factors, the stability of the economy, the quality of the products and brands from the country, are equally important, or even more in the case of the stability of the economy. And stability of government is also extremely important. Sustainability is coming up really high in that drivers analysis too. Something that everybody's talking about, but probably no one has quantified yet. Well, here it is. International relations, education, they also matter. So what this is telling us is that it isn't just about attractiveness in a given area. It is about considering your nation brand holistically and understanding where you are and what you're projecting and what people think about you in all those different markets that you're trying to influence. As I mentioned, we did this for every single area. Now, trade, that relationship is even stronger, as you can see. And onto the drivers for what drives recommendation for people to buy products and services from countries. Again, products and brands, you would expect, very high up there, second most important driver. But again, the stability of the economy comes first. Ease of doing business, another business and trade factor, also important. But culture, appealing lifestyle, being a great place to visit, an attractive destination in general, and the arts and entertainment coming from the country, they're also pretty important here, not to be neglected. Sustainability and governance and education, again, quite important too. So there are so many things that impact how a nation is perceived. We measure all that, and we try to understand how each of those nation brand attributes drives the recommendation of nation brands as destinations for those 4 economic segments. And since we've done this analysis, we also want to present to you what are the top nations in each and every one of those questions that we've asked about recommendation of nation brands as destinations for investment, trade, talent, and tourism. So without further ado, let me play the 2 videos that show the regional leaders and the global leaders from our research, according to the people we've surveyed, in terms of their attractiveness as destinations to invest in and to buy products and services from. Congratulations to Switzerland and Germany. We've already given out the awards at an award ceremony last night, so there won't be any presentations. But may I now invite our panel, Courtney, Fingar, and her panelists to the stage.
Thank you very much, Conrad, and thanks to Brand Finance for giving me the opportunity to lead this panel on what is an extremely interesting and relevant topic, especially to those of us in the industry of foreign direct investment. And I guess, you know, I don't need to do a preamble talking about the links between soft power and FDI and trade, because Conrad just did that for me. Now, I think it's a little bit debatable which direction the relationship goes. It's usually more of a virtuous circle because soft power can influence trade and trade and investment can influence soft power, and we may not be able to untangle whether the chicken or the egg comes first. But what we can agree on is there is a link, and it does matter. And of course, the business of FDI and investment promotion is really very centered on location brands by its very nature. And one thing that we'll talk about in this discussion that intrigues me, and we have some people who can give us some great answers on this on the stage right now, is how do you speak to multiple audiences? So how can campaigns geared towards talent, to students, to visitors also speak to potential investors and trade partners, and how do we marry the two? So that's enough out of me. As you heard, I'm Courtney Fingar. I'm an FDI commentator and consultant. More importantly, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have Kate Taylor-Tett, who's the director of the Great Britain and Northern Ireland campaign. Most of you, especially if you're from the UK, will probably have seen this branding all around and be familiar with this campaign. We have Jennifer Mackinlay, who's the general manager for Europe and a senior trade and investment commissioner at Austrade, which of course is representing Australia. And we have Giovanni Sacchi, who's the director here in London of the Italian Trade Agency. Now, this is a pretty good cross-section of locations, namely in different parts of the world, but you all three are representing countries that have a strong nation brand, a largely positive nation brand, and that do well in the index that we've seen. So I want to hear a little bit about how in your work you're able to leverage that, but also what challenges you might encounter as you do that. So I'm just going to ask all of you as an opener the first question and get your headline thoughts, and then we'll kind of delve a little bit deeper. So tell me, and we'll start with Jennifer, and then we'll go right down the line. Or sorry, we're going to start with Kate.
Okay.
Apologies. And tell us, how much does the concept of soft power infuse your work and the strategies that you try to employ to promote your countries?
Cool, thanks, Courtney. I mean, the short answer is soft power plays a really important role in our trade and investment promotion. We'd certainly look to overtly talk about some elements of soft power in that promotion. Conrad referenced some of those elements, some of those pillars in the material that he just took us through. But certainly things like governance, rule of law, the strength of diplomatic ties are obviously crucial to many trade and investment decisions. So we'd certainly be looking to highlight that in a lot of the work that we do. But we'd also be looking to draw on some of the more cultural pillars. So if we're running trade and investment events, we'll certainly be using UK food and drink there. And we may even be using UK music or very influential UK nationals to promote our trade and investment in sort of digital and content campaigns. But I think probably more interestingly than that, we're really aware of harnessing the sort of indirect effects of soft power, really creating a connection with trade and investment, which might not be immediately obvious. And in fact, that sort of principle and that way of working is central to the way that as the UK we structure the Great Campaign and the reason that we work in the way that we do. So hopefully you know we have a single brand, Great, for the UK international promotion. So that has a look and feel to it. It has a clear brand promise. But we would use that across our trade and investment promotion as well as tourism promotion, the work that we do to attract international students, but also work to celebrate lots of our brilliant cultural icons, everything from James Bond to the royal family to the Premier League, all gets communicated under that one single brand. And Great is now in its 13th year of existence. We have 22 different government departments, not to mention a whole plethora of private sector brands, private sector organisations which operate under the brand. And that idea of consistency of brand has always been absolutely crucial to everything that we do. And I suppose the reason that it's been crucial is that we always take an audience-first approach to everything that we do. We're very clear that an individual who might be making international trade and investment decisions is also likely to be thinking about travelling internationally. They might be thinking about educating themselves or their family internationally. And they're certainly going to have interests, whether that's film or TV or sport or music. And so they are being influenced consistently by soft power pillars. And whether consciously or unconsciously, when they're then coming to make investment decisions, they're not purely looking at the investment and trade landscape on its own. They are looking more broadly to build a picture of the UK. And so it's very important that we think about the role of those different factors in doing so. I think our job, therefore, as Great, is to sort of remind our audience of those soft power factors as they're going through that trade and investment decision-making process. And we might do that in a whole range of different ways, but an example might be we talk often about UK education. I probably don't need to remind this group, but the UK has 4 of the world's top 10 universities. I think at last count, 25% of countries in the world had a leader educated in the UK. That type of messaging is clearly very compelling. And there's also quite a logical flow through to the fact that excellent educational institutions create a thriving scene for innovation and in turn investment. We also might talk about UK values. So we have a very successful campaign called Great Love, which is always about promoting the UK support for the LGBTQI+ community. Again, there's lots of very compelling evidence about cities, and I think in turn country brands that support and champion diversity create better innovation ecosystems and in turn create better investment opportunities. But we also don't shy away from promoting soft power pillars, which maybe don't, in your sort of immediate thought, have a clear connection to trade and investment. So we see, for example, that when a business audience have seen UK tourism advertising, they then engage much better with trade and investment communications off the back of that. We also have lots of anecdotal evidence of the power of James Bond and Paddington Bear and the Premier League in engaging a hard-to-reach investment audience. So I think it goes without saying that soft power plays a crucial role in the promotion that we're doing of trade and investment today. I think what's really interesting is it's also paving the way for trade and investment decisions which are happening in 20 or 30 years' time. We know that the decision makers of tomorrow are already forming opinions about the UK and countries across the world, and often that is very soft power based. And so it's really important, I think, that we understand the role that soft power can play in building a sort of secure legacy for nation brands, not just for today but into the future. And I suppose to summarise, a really important thing for us as the UK, but as great in thinking about trade and investment promotion, is that we never think about trade and investment promotion or that audience in isolation. We understand that any individual's perception of a country, but particularly the UK, is extremely complex and it has lots of different influences. But I think by really understanding that complexity and embracing it, we can use it to our advantage, whether that be to promote trade and investment opportunities or actually more broadly about the UK offering.
Great. I think that the campaign is an interesting one because you do encompass all those different audiences within that overarching banner of talking to the different audiences. And other countries take a different approach. They have wildly different campaigns. I guess it helps if you already have great in the country name. It does give you, it's a bit of a give me as something to hang your hat on, but it does appear to work quite well. So Jennifer, obviously Australia would have a different type of influence, that's based on being a new nation rather than deep history, much like the US as well. So talk to us about how you leverage soft power and maybe what kind of considerations come into play for you.
Look, thanks, Courtney, and look, it's an absolute pleasure to be here today and obviously prosecute the case for Australia. We haven't talked much about it this morning. We had a mention of Queensland, but in the space of sort of 5 minutes, I'll give you a bit of a sort of a further pitch. Look, soft power is incredibly important, and the way that Australia is perceived by the rest of the world has a direct impact on our ability to attract foreign direct investment into Australia, advance trade, attract tourism, and particularly talent. When you think about it, Australia is it's a wealthy nation. We are the 13th largest economy in the world, but it's ironic because we're actually quite a small country, and I mean that in terms of population, 25 million people, but and we're a long way away, of course. Just 3 or 4 films on the plane. But our nation brand is incredibly powerful and probably for really quite different reasons to Great Britain. We're not yet Great Australia. I think what I'd like to start with is what David was talking about this morning, so familiarity. Australia has an incredibly deep familiarity. When I say Australia to you, you're going to think about incredibly breathtaking landscapes, expansive beaches, white sand, incredibly colourful birds, amazing flora, really unique and indigenous fauna. Some not so friendly as others. And then we also have this incredible heritage. So yes, we are modern, but at the same time, we have this incredible heritage in terms of the world's longest continuous living culture, and that is our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population. And all of that is incredibly beautifully drawn out and depicted by Tourism Australia in their campaigns. And also, you know, the fact that, I mean, let's face it, let's take an opinion poll. Alistair did that this morning. How many people have been to Australia? Not bad, not bad. How many people are going? Oh, come on. Okay, so look, familiarity is there, and we also have a fantastic reputation. I've lived in France for almost 25 years, and I'm pleased to say that every time I say that I'm Australian, in France or elsewhere in Europe, the rest of the world, people naturally smile. People have a lot of goodwill towards Australia because our people are incredibly upbeat, they're friendly, they're generous, they're fun, they work hard, they play hard, they're sporty. Yes, they're obsessed with their sport. But above all, we really value our lifestyle. And Kate and I were talking about the weather earlier, and Kate talks about the bad weather. I'm afraid we can really talk up the sun because, you know, it's such a puller. The other thing that really enhances our reputation, and just building on what was said this morning, is the fact that we really can celebrate what is an incredibly diverse population. Almost a third of our population is from overseas, so whether that's the UK, China, Philippines, Europe, elsewhere in the world. So it's incredibly rich, and it's double the OECD average. So our multiculturalism is something that we really celebrate. In terms of diversity, we have one of the biggest pride festivals in the world with Sydney Mardi Gras. And I think a lot of you were probably glued to the box just in the last 6 months when Australia and New Zealand hosted the FIFA Women's World Cup. And this was more than a sporting event. This was a globally unifying and pivotal moment in the history of women's sport. And this is what our government is also fully backing and fully behind. It's about equality and fairness for women and other minorities. In business, our cultural diversity is really our superpower. I think it enables us to build trusted commercial relationships which are really built on shared values. And in this day and age, what is really important is like-mindedness. But soft power is more than just reputation, and that's where we can look at these very interesting 35 attributes that brand finance has pulled out and looked at more closely and assessed. So in the OECD, we have these rankings which rank us first in terms of environmental quality. We have equity in healthcare, which is so incredibly important today, a transparent and fair legal system, just to name a few. Our workforce, it's one of the most highly educated in the world. Just behind the UK, we have the largest number of universities in the top 100. And so this means for investment that investors can invest in Australia and really tap into really smart, educated students, people who are studying the latest enabling critical technologies, AI, quantum, cyber. These are the technologies of tomorrow that really matter. We also have an incredibly powerful, I'd say, cohort. We have some 600,000 international students studying in Australia. And so they're going there to get an education, and some of the prime ministers from the world around have also studied in Australia, just as they have in the UK. But they go there for an education, but they discover that there's a lifestyle. They discover that there's so much more. And so these people, they become ambassadors for Australia for the future. And so with their languages, with their networks, they have a direct impact on trade and investment because they come back with a positive experience. And I'd like to point out also the great work that organisations such as Advance. Advance is a network of inspiring Australians abroad, and they act as ambassadors to grow Australia's reputation. And they also do a lot for our soft power. We talked a lot this morning about stable economy, and Australia, thankfully, due to its geographical situation, but also because of its policy settings, it's far away, but it has a very stable economy. And that is just so important at the moment. And I think something that we haven't really drawn on and talked about this morning is also the importance of high ESG standards. And that is really, really important to investment today. And I know that a lot of clean energy investors that are looking at Australia, obviously I'm focused on the UK, Europe and Israel in my patch, so to speak, but they are constantly telling us that it's the policy settings that our government has put in place that are providing clarity and that are really helping them make the business case for establishing in Australia or reinvesting in Australia and doing more. And so it was great to see that Australia moved up the rankings to 13th place in terms of sustainable future. I would like to wager a bet that we will move up even further next year. So hopefully, we'll look at the stats next year, and we'll also see how government's focus on green economy and clean energy is really important and how that becomes more of a priority for populations. Just returning to robust ESG practices.
I will have to get you to wrap up in just a minute.
I'm on a roll.
That's all right, you are on a roll.
Look, I'll be really quick, but in terms of the critical minerals piece, I saw the video there earlier. We're not just a country digging things out of the ground. We're a country that has every critical mineral and rare earth that goes into an EV. So, but not just any old country digging things out of the ground. We have the ESG practices, and that's why other countries want to come to us to buy our product. So look, soft power really is helping us build our trade and investment. We're also influencing the rest of the world. We think that we can be a renewable energy superpower and help the rest of the world on this journey to electrification and decarbonisation. And so I think that's a really important point for us to talk about today. And finally, look, in terms of nation brand, obviously a lot younger. We're on a journey, but it's a nation brand which is incredibly powerful. It was constructed together with our Aboriginal colleagues from Ballarangi. It's powerful, it's green, it's clean, and it brings together, the whole of Australia in terms of states, territories, and other stakeholders, private industry, to really push Australia's image and attract further trade and investment into Australia. Sorry, I've got
No, not at all. Thank you very much, and I'm glad you raised the ESG and sustainability piece because this is becoming more and more important.
Yes.
We saw it in Conrad's chart, how important that is to investment decisions, but it also ties in very closely and more so with nation brands. So that's something to be leveraged for sure. Now, Giovanni, when we're thinking of Italy, most people have overwhelmingly positive associations that you can leverage. It maybe would also be fair to say for its cultural influence, its economic clout, Italy hasn't reached its full potential for the attraction of FDI. It does very well in trade, and I assume you're working to change that. So I'm curious how you feel you can leverage your very strong soft power to help Italy reach its full potential for FDI.
Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, to Brand Finance for organizing this event and to support my participation today here. As was mentioned by my colleagues, Italy is a little bit different in the sense that we are a very strong trade power in the sense that we are the second largest exporter in Europe and one of the largest exporters in the world, the 8th exporter in the world. And we focus a lot on the structure of our economy, which is based on small and medium-sized enterprises. And we have almost 160,000 exporters. And as the trade agency of our government, we concentrate our effort leveraging our soft powers, the famous, the so-called 4F, which constitutes the base of our export. The first of which comes to mind is fashion, food, furniture, but the fourth one is not so well known, but is really one of our great success on exporting point of view, which is the F for factory automation, which with this category, we include the technology to make the things which we are really the leader. For example, we are the leader exporter and the leader producer in the world in machinery to cut marbles, machinery to prepare ceramic tiles, machine tool and robotics. This part of the Italian industry is not so well known, and our effort as a trade agency, as the government, has been in the past 6-7 years to focus on these less known aspects of Italian production. We launched 7 years years ago a campaign which is called Italy Extraordinary Commonplace, which was very successful. We won the best prize in the Lion in Cannes for the prize for advertising. We wanted, and I think this, if you have the chance to see that video, is very important because we started in 2015 to focus on the fact that, for example, we started on a very small image that somebody thinks that we are just flirting lovers, the stereotype of Italians, and then you see in the image opens up and you see that we are, for example, the leader. They are talking about leader production of video games. For example, in the gaming industry, the Italian video game industry is one of the leaders together with UK in the world. And all that idea, then we developed this idea and we launched 2 years ago, also following the very successful example of Great, to start focusing something with it, and especially with the brand Made in Italy, because Made in Italy is our brand, which is well known all over the world. And we launched this campaign, which is called Be It, focusing on the 6 elements that constitute the base of our success expo stories. As you mentioned, we are trying to leverage this successful story as exporting country in also the investment side, where we are a little bit far behind compared to other countries, but we are still recovering. For example, the latest figures of last year showed almost 400 projects of greenfield investment in Italy. As you know, Italy recently received from the EU Union the largest amount of funding from the Plan for Resilience and Recovery, and in that specific plan, almost 200 billion euro, a special focus is based on investment in the 2 transitions, the digital and the green transition. So I think that these opportunities and also a much more stable government that we are having in the past few years can increase the image. And in this sense, our organization decided a few years ago to create a special department within ourselves, the Department of Investment, and to create 21 units in all our offices. Now we have 65 offices and 79 offices in 65 countries, but in 21 countries, UK is one of that, we've created a special invest unit that we didn't have so far. And I thank also Austrade, which is the director of this investment unit and is working with me, with Pietro, just to inform investors in UK. UK is one of our major investors in Italy, and we have been able to establish a very close relation with British companies. Last year, the Italian government and the British government signed a very important memorandum on trade and investment promotion. According to this memorandum, we are working close together with the Department of Business and Trade in Italy, with our organization, and we are launching new initiatives like, for example, the CEO Forum, which will be held every year, once in Italy, once in UK, and this year will be in UK late spring, in order to focus the interest on our economy and to establish a profit relations.
Thank you very much. And by the way, for the audience, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to open the floor to questions. So be thinking what you might like to ask and be prepared to get your hand up. But what I'd like to ask each of you is, you know, you've all spoken about positive associations, cultural aspects that your countries are known for. How do you avoid cliches and unseriousness, and how can you link things like, you know, heritage with innovation and that need to be showing investors that you're forward-looking and that you have innovative technologies and you're not just beaches or royals or pasta? How do you marry those two things? I'll ask you first, Kate.
Absolutely. Yes, really good challenge. So I think you'll know for the UK, we're blessed from a soft power point of view, particularly around sort of history and heritage and culture. And yeah, I would never say that we didn't want those things. They do such a brilliant job for us. But to your point, I suppose sometimes there is a little bit of a challenge if somebody's first impression of the UK is beautiful country houses and Mr. Bean, still very, very popular in Asia, and Shakespeare, then maybe there's not an immediate thought that we might be a tech-first nation. Now, of course, we are a huge tech-first nation, and with the third biggest tech economy in the world, we've created more tech unicorns than France and Germany combined, but they're not necessarily natural bedfellows. And I think particularly some of those sort of more cultural and historic pillars of soft power are being established very early on. People are often learning about that as children, and so you're having to disrupt some sort of very sort of set perceptions about the UK when we want to educate about the UK of today and tomorrow. That said, I think actually sometimes these things can work very well together. In fact, when I first took on this role, one of my main concerns was how do we balance the sort of heritage and modernity of the UK, but really we're not giving enough credit to an international audience who, of course, can understand that you can be both things. And actually, the relationship between the two things can sometimes be really useful. I think a good example for the UK, for example, is storytelling. We're known as brilliant storytellers, you know, Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Dickens, Roald Dahl, whoever else. We continue to be great storytellers in that sense. We have, you know, lots of new great authors, but we also storytell in a new way. So the UK is at the cutting edge of special effects in film and TV, and the UK is at the cutting edge of computer games. You know, we are still storytellers, but we're just bringing a sense of modernity to that. Another good example might be something like Oxford University, you know, clearly an amazing sort of cultural heritage and history around it. Latterly, also known for its connection to Harry Potter, but also, you know, one of the most successful COVID vaccines was created there. And us telling that story and connecting some of those better known sort of historical and cultural pillars with the more modern stories actually helps our audience understand a more rounded UK and can be really helpful.
Right, thank you. Jennifer, how do you tackle that? I mean, I guess less on the history, but again, Australia's got this association with fun and, as you mentioned, sport and outdoors. Does that work against you in any way?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. We have this, we talked about familiarity earlier, and so that's just, you know, a huge plus, isn't it? But as Kate was saying, it's about trying to find this balance, and you know, we love the fact that people find that Australia is very easygoing, non-stressed and fun, but we want people to take Australia very seriously as well. And I was just thinking about that famous throw another shrimp on the Barbie sort of cringe, excuse me, visual, you know, the koalas and the kangaroos. But now if we take that very example of the shrimp on the Barbie, what we're doing now is we're able to transform that crustacean into a far more sophisticated image. And when I say that, what we're trying to do in terms of trade promotion is project Australia as a very reliable, sustainable, clean producer of food and produce. That's why people want to buy this produce from Australia, because it's clean, sustainable and traceable. And so our seafood, if you think about what we call Patagonian toothfish, which is on the plates of some of the best restaurants here in the UK, that's what people really want to taste, because it's unique, it's fresh and it's green. And building again once on this sort of net zero piece, we don't want to just be producing, you know, the minerals to the world. We want to be using, you know, the smart technologies to produce the new technologies of the world and electrify and decarbonise the world with these technologies. And so we're projecting a smarter image. And if you take, again, just coming back to, you know, to our poor prawn, you know, we're setting up some of the first carbon neutral fisheries, factories, farms and wineries to attack that carbon challenge, and that is really powerful in terms of trade and investment.
Thank you. I can tell you work in branding anyway, because you upgraded it to a crustacean. Shrimp on the Barbie already sounds a little bit more sophisticated. Giovanni, I guess, you know, food looms large as well when you think about Italy, but Italy also, as you mentioned, is plagued with cliches as well, not all of which are helpful.
Yes, yes. I mentioned already some of them. One other example, also always related to food, was an activity that we developed the whole past year. We are continuing also this year because, as you know, Italy is very much appreciated for the quality of its food, but normally it's not so well known that we are the most sustainable agriculture in Europe. We have the largest number of products for the denomination of origin, the so-called PDO, in Europe, and all this aspect we tried to highlight last year and this year with a special campaign we called La Verde Vita, which means Dolce Vita, the traditional way, translated in Verde, because, for example, we are one of the leaders in circular economy, the capability of transforming and recycling products. At the same time, as relating to technology and to the importance also of innovation, we have recently invested a lot in the startup ecosystem, which was a little bit far behind in the sense of less financed, and so we are trying to invest particularly our effort in highlighting the Italian startup system and creating links. For example, here in UK, we have established a very strong cooperation with the VC and with the incubator accelerator, with a very thriving ecosystem, British ecosystem, in order to give this opportunity and this window for our companies.
Thank you. And food tech is one of the most innovative areas of the economy, and obviously countries with a strong history and heritage in food are ideal place to lead that. You could argue Italy as well, with the farm to table and 1 kilometer food was sort of doing all of that before the hipsters got onto it. So definitely has a role to play there. I'd love to know what questions. I have more questions, but we'll take some from you all. First, I see your hand right here in the front. There is a microphone here in the middle. Microphone coming around.
Thank you for your contributions. Natasha Norman, Institute for Identity. I'm curious who actually defines the content of soft power. We all agree soft power is great, but is it the creative agency who says, okay, let's promote this? Is it you looking at the trends and saying, aha, sustainability is fashionable, how can we respond to that? Is it the choice of CEO, or is there a governmental body where you actually say, okay, this is what we're going to say about Italy or about Australia? So how is this done? Who sets up the content, and do you coordinate it with tourism or talent attraction? And another question is, what would you advise to smaller countries who do not have Mr. Bean, Sun, or pasta? You know, if there are no products that are known worldwide, how should they go about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Two good questions. We'll start with the first, and any of you can volunteer, you can all answer. Who sets the tone and this sort of strategic objective about how you're defining your nation? Because that's quite a big question. And how do you find alignment? Who has a strong opinion on this? Go ahead.
Well, we, as an organization, we have a sort of our stakeholders, which meet every year. We call in Italy cabina di regia. It means a sort of big board where all the ministry, also representatives of the industry, all the associations. Every year, the next meeting will be at the beginning of March. Every year, there is this huge meeting of about 100 members, representative of government, representative of association, representative of industry. They outline the strategy for internationalization of the Italian economy, and they define the principal chapter, the principal lines of activities. Then they are declined according to the different structure. We have the tourist board, which is ENIT. We have the trade agency. We have the investment in Italia agents. We have different boards, and then according to these guidelines, these general guidelines as the general principle, they decline the structure. For example, the idea of launching a national branding campaign was taken 3-4 years ago by this big board meetings of all the association, and then our organization, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is our controller, our finance and supporter, decided to outline the brief, the presentation. And then there was an international tender, because this campaign was worth about 35 million euro. So the international, the winner of the international tender decided the way how to decline this campaign, and we are running out this for now. There will be the third year of this campaign. The first part was focusing on a concept, be Italian. Now we are more focusing on the Made in Italy, so it's Made in Italy campaign.
Okay, so there's a kind of clear structure.
Yeah, we have a clear structure, yes.
How do you do it, Kate?
I was going to say, I think there's a slight sort of nuance between what your country stands for and then those things that you decide to promote. So I think in terms of what your country stands for, you have to start with a truth. And you might not have pasta or Mr. Bean or the sun, but every country will have something which is true. And from a UK point of view, we sort of started from a point of view of saying, well, the UK has this rich culture of creativity and innovation, which is sort of undoubted, you know, it is proven, it is a fact. And you can talk to lots of people in the UK, but also internationally, and they will recognise that. So we took that as a starting point, that truth, and then built from there to understand, well, what is it about the UK which means that that is true? And there are lots of answers, which I won't have time to go into today, but one of them, for example, is around diversity or the idea of independent thought. And then we built this positioning of see things differently, which is really about embracing fresh perspectives and inviting the world to do the same. But I think in terms of that positioning, it is based on a truth, but it is flexible enough that it can support a variety of different messaging. And that is absolutely crucial because as a nation brand, you're always going to have to communicate lots of different things. And I think to the point that Giovanni is making, you know, year on year, government policy might dictate that you're dialing up talking about sustainability or you're dialing up tourism this year. But if you ultimately have a brand truth at the heart of your communication vehicle, then you will always have something really strong to fall back on. So that's important that you get that bit right. And that not only is it as truth that is understood within your country, but it is also something that your international audience, if you're going to be audience first, accept and understand and embrace, because there would be no point me setting up a brand for the UK which is all about the sun, because it fundamentally would not be credible. So that, I think, is what's really important in establishing those principles before you set out.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, there was a second question, but I'd like to pose that one to you, Jennifer, if I can. I mean, yes, it's true that all the countries represented here, you sort of have, I wouldn't say you have an easy job, because I know you don't, but you have quite a lot to work with when it comes to these positive associations. What if you have a small country, a more obscure country, without some of these big attributes? What would you do? How can you unearth something there?
Yeah, look, it's a very big question for a small country. I think I really believe in the power of storytelling, and we've talked a little bit about that this morning. It's about looking at, well, what are the priorities for the country in terms of trade and investment, and then how are you going to, you know, zoom in on some of those priorities and tell a story about them to the rest of the world, to gain that sort of to gain audience, profile, and get the attention. And, when I look at some of the, small things that we do, with limited budgets, for example, digital campaigns that we are running here in Europe, all around, net zero and the transition to net zero and what our country is doing in that respect, you actually gain a lot of profile and you really influence people. That's that soft power at work. And so I think that small countries can still really punch above their weight by leveraging some of those those digital assets, but really focusing in on what's priority and then telling a story about it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Thank you. I think there are two gentlemen here. We have 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask you to both ask quite quick questions and we can get both in. And I'm sorry that we're probably not going to get around the room as I hoped. Sorry.
Hi, Thomas Mason. I work at the BBC. My question is, you haven't mentioned the UK-Australia free trade deal, which came into effect with some fanfare last year, one of the supposed benefits or opportunities of Brexit. Supposedly we've got £4 billion less on tariffs, but has it made any practical difference? Are people going between the two countries more? Is there an opportunity into this larger CPTPP partnership, whatever it's called? Is it a good thing, and is that helping your storytelling in any way? I suppose for the gentleman from Italy, is the UK still an attractive destination to trade with?
So in the interest of time, so I'll get you both to answer this quickly. We won't sort of go around the panel because I want to get another question in. But yeah, since it involves both your countries, do these kind of trade deals matter?
Look, absolutely, and I'll get in trouble if I get started. Look, there are huge benefits and opportunities with this trade agreement. Already we have fantastic historical people-to-people ties with the UK, but now's an opportunity to really ramp up the trade and investment, the two different flows from our countries. I also see incredible benefits in terms of recognition, mutual recognition of qualifications for professionals such as doctors and lawyers and engineers. It encourages our students to come backwards and forwards, youngsters to be able to spend time in Australia or in the UK. And that means, for example, in terms of trade and investment, we can really build on, encouraging innovation and collaboration between the two countries as well. So starting with the universities, and also some of the arrangements that we can arrange for, professionals travelling from, say, UK companies, going out to Australia and spending time there. So they're just a few sort of 30-second pitch of why it's so fantastic. We're very involved in it. We're really working hard to implement that FTA and really raise the profile of the benefits and the opportunities for our Australian exporters and also for UK investors into Australia.
Thank you.
I mean, I just echo everything that Jennifer says. Obviously, we think it's really important, not only because of just an overarching perception that our countries should be working closer together. There's lots of small businesses that might not otherwise have thought about Australia as an export market or an investment market, but that creates that connection. But of course, the deal also puts in place lots of practical support, which allows that to happen.
Great.
Yeah, with removal of tariffs and quotas.
Absolutely, and there is a kind of holy alliance between trade and investment as well. So the stronger the trade relationships are, the stronger investment relationship.
And I think also to other things as well. So we will see an impact in tourism, no doubt, and education, which is driven by that trade deal. So it's not just trade and investment.
Great, thank you. We may get one quick question, and if you got the mic. And apologies, because I think I missed a question over there, and I'm very sorry. That's on me.
But basically yesterday at a panel, an interesting fact was mentioned about Switzerland, how it's obviously ranking on top in very many metrics, and then there's a couple, for example, fun and entertainment, where they're ranking around 44th, which is quite interesting compared to being number one in all these other things. And so my question to you is, you all obviously have brands, or are in charge of brands of countries that rank very high up and are very strong brands. So what are some of the things that maybe you have noticed that are not quite high up there with the other metrics? And if you know these, how do you plan to tackle them?
Thank you. We've just a minute and a half, but I'm going to turn to Giovanni. No pressure there. Are there any sort of other factors that we don't think about as often with soft power that you think are important?
Well, first of all, I think the possibility of presenting, maybe giving the, as I said before, avoiding the cliché and the commonplace, trying to look for the country, for a special country, even a little one, not linked only to the things for which it is known. Try to discover beyond the less known aspects, trying to discover what are the interesting point. As I mentioned the example for Italy, we never imagined that, for example, we are one of the larger contributors of the Vega station in the space, or that the recent approved project of the interlink between UK and Scotland and Denmark is provided by an Italian leading companies. So I think the suggestion is for the small company to try to avoid the cliché and try to focus on one specific aspect that is not well known and can be exploited.
That's very good advice. Thank you. And we'll have to end there. It's such an interesting topic. I wish we could continue more. And again, I'm sorry, I wish we could take more questions. But thank you for your attention and the questions that we did get. And most of all, thank you, all three of you, for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.